maybe AI is a democratizing force where it equalizes access to the best talent, right? And you've seen this in some studies, right, where they'll put AI in a call center, and it doesn't help the elites, the star performers. It helps all the poor and average performers behave and perform like elites. And so I think a case, and time will tell, right, how AI kind of shakes out. But you could make a case that it becomes like a utility that's just ambient and sitting around all of our systems, enabling us to have PhD level talent and support at our fingertips. Right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Brian Mac Mahon on the show. He's been a longtime collaborator of Team Ignite, been wanting to talk to him for a long time. He's the head honcho and founder at Expert Dojo, one of the most active, if not the most active startup accelerator in SoCal. I'm in NorCal, so California love. And I'm also Irish, so Irish love. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, my friend. It's good to have two Brians in the same place.
Two Brians, Brian. Would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
So starting from the end and working my way backwards, I would say accidental VC. I don't want to have that in my tombstone, but
as most of us are. I don't know if anybody intentionally finds their way into this.
Right? Yes, I agree with you. So through Expert Dojo, have invested in almost 300 companies. We love early stage startup. I would say accidental VC, but on purpose growth hacker. I love growth. Growth is my when I wake up in the morning with a big old smile, it's because something in growth has happened in a really good way. And I believe in growth through emotional resonance. And so when I can take a company, whether it's mine or theirs or something I'm just engaged in, to a level of really deep emotional resonance, that gives me way more pleasure than raising a subsequent Series A or something. Right? So yeah, love growth, like VC. CVC is a great vehicle to be able to maximize the returns that come from growth companies that we invest in.
And what's CVC for folks that don't know what that is?
Venture capital. So within venture, I think if anybody who's starting a company, you have three choices. Choice number one is you don't need any money. Your customer is the person who gives you the revenue, and you build a great company through being able to generate more revenue than you pay out in expenses. Choice number two is that you will raise money for something because it has a slightly bigger lift at the beginning. Maybe it might be technology lift, or it might be manufacturing or something. So you raise money through some angels or some local people or some family because you just have to satisfy that lift until you can get a place to positive revenue. And then the third one is pure gambling, which is venture capital. And that is that you go in with a bunch of people who give you a bunch of money, more and more and more and more and more. And it very closely resembles a Ponzi scheme on such an amazing amount of levels, until you get to a stage 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years in the future when you're dead and your kids have taken over the company, or the venture capitalist kids have taken over the company, and you hit profit.
And you sell your company for $1 billion and you end up with 10 million.
Well, you sell your company for $1 billion, but it costs you $4 billion to actually turn it into $1 billion company. Yes.
That's hilarious. That's great capital efficiency. So why do folks bother? Why raise god awful amounts of money in venture capital? Is it that they believe the vision to be so big that they're going to be the next Google or Amazon, and so you might as well burn as much money as possible to capture that market?
Yeah, I think from a venture capital, so there's two perspectives, right? One perspective is the entrepreneur, and the other perspective is venture capital. From a venture capitalist perspective, you can get a good return from investing in early stage. You and I both know, we can get really good returns from early stage companies by investing correctly. And the more companies you invest in, the more you get to pattern recognize what's happening with those companies, and you get better at it. It's like anything else.
Right.
I was terrible at the beginning, and then I became less terrible, and now I've got pretty good. After 300, I should, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're amazing and you become an Andreessen, you can have returns of 30, 35% every single year on people's money. And limited partners like that, right? And for earlier VCs, it can be slightly more challenging, that journey. And some people have more bad luck than others. But anyway, everybody wants to get to that place. And I think for founders, really, it could be answered. Their motivation can be answered in one word. It's Netflix. There's a lot of very good documentaries.
What do you mean by that? It's Netflix.
They just see some Netflix documentary of like, I'm going to build $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And even if I launch WeWork and it's the greatest catastrophe of all things, I still get $1 billion.
Right.
It's awesome. So,
how do you feel about that when you meet a founder? Does that turn you off? Some VCs are really turned off by kind of the overly financially ambitious founders, the ones that are kind of looking for valuations and exits and money raised and that kind of stuff, versus like a vision. I need to build this. It needs to exist in the world. I need to solve this problem. How do you think about the balance between kind of, I need to build something, ambition, and I need to like make a lot of money, ambition?
So I think right now, everything is messed up. All of it. I think that it's not about founders. Founders just do what venture capitalists tell them to do. Generally speaking, it's all venture capitalists. Venture capitalists, like it used to be that a company would go public at a valuation of like 50, 60, $70 million. Like a huge public valuation, like public IPO 20 years ago was raising $5-7 million IPO, right? And then some smart venture capitalists got into a room with another smart venture capitalist. So they're like, can you imagine if a Series A, rather than it being like $1 million, how about if it was like 10 million? And then like a couple of years later, a couple of more really smart VCs.
I did the Dr. Evil pinky at the corner of my mouth for anyone that's listening.
And they're saying, hey, how about, because it's COVID, we manipulate a media empire from nowhere, and we make sure that nobody can see anybody's faces, and we give them 100 million on Tuesday. How about we do that? Wouldn't that be great? Even though there's no validity whatsoever that this thing is going to work after we actually leave our homes again. And so, yeah, like most of it's a Ponzi scheme. And there's this toxic relationship between VCs and founders, right? And this, by the way, this doesn't mean it's bad. I talk in things very black and white. Nothing is black and white. Everything are shades of gray. And there's wonderful things that come from innovation. And money needs to be put into it. The problem is when you get 12-year-old kids who are math majors who come in and they try and work out how you maximize venture capital revenue, it's always going to go to shit. Like the world is always going to go to shit. And then what happens is you then hire more 12-year-old environmental majors who will justify how actually none of the things that are being done are negatively affecting the world in any kind of bad way. But in reality, what happens is it leads to the absolute destruction of nations. And I genuinely see that happening in the US right now. I see us building more and more garbage. I see us destroying more and more jobs. I see AI pulling people off. Even what's happening in Hollywood is such a visual example of hundreds of thousands of jobs being just destroyed with some justification of, you're not losing your job to a robot, you're losing your job to somebody who knows how to work with a robot. and so I'll summarize this with one thing. Venture capital is awesome when it helps really good founders who have the ability to execute, break through, and build technologies that will just further all of us, right? It doesn't have to further mankind or womankind. It doesn't have to further all of us. Some of them will be deeply meaningful to the universe. Some of them will allow us to sit in cars without driving, and some of us will just allow us to have more friends or less friends, whatever we prefer. But if we turn that thing, which is money fueling innovation, to help create better stuff, and we replace it with smart 12-year-olds who are really good at being able to work out the math of how much money you need to put into a founder just because they went to a really nice school, and there's a higher probability that that founder will know more people who've got more money, then we just destroy the whole country. And I think we're in a really, really big risk of that happening right now, because that formula has already been set. It already works, unfortunately, and it does not include people that form most of the demographics in the US today or a lot of places in the world.
So I think what you're describing is this formulaic financial engineered version of venture capital that's driven by algorithms and AI. Is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly
Because it's always been a cottage industry, right? That, kind of, was small. It's a very small percentage of the overall financial markets, right? Financial markets are huge, right? We have, I don't know, 100 trillion, something like that in financial markets, and venture capital every year raises, at the peak, maybe 100 million, 80 billion, I mean. And I think that's come down obviously in the last year, but yeah, there is this risk, I think. Why are you concerned about this? Is it because bad things get funded and bad things get built, or?
And by the way, look, I will bring some optimism to the conversation later on, because I don't just, like, first of all, us Irish people, look, you know this, Brian, like, we absolutely thrive in dark human situations. So yeah. For us, this has formed our campfire conversations for years. But I'll say there's two things. Like, first is like just getting more depressing, and then I'll balance it with a tiny bit of optimism. So getting more depressing, I believe that like this 80 billion or whatever the number is actually is the majority of the financial system. Because if you can get kids and brainwash them at the age of 2, you own the kids for their whole lives, right? Especially when they're doing really important things in the future. And so if you get venture capital, think about like how it's evolved during time. It used to be VC would get a company public at $50 million, and from $50 million or 100, like I think Microsoft was 100 or 120 million at valuation. And so when they IPO'd, and so like the PE firms, they had that all the rest of the time, right? So from 100 million to $1 trillion or $2 trillion, PE firms own that. From 0 to 100 million, venture capitalists used to own that. Venture capitalists didn't get very much. PE firms got everything. Today, look at Coinbase 2-3 years ago, and they're back there now, so it's okay. So it's not even a bad thing, but like $100 billion IPO, like get that. I had friends saying to me, hey man, I think I can get into the Coinbase. I'm like, what the fuck? Like $100 billion IPO? There is no multiple justification. There's no anything justification, and they're there. And so on one side of it, venture capitalists has become so dominant in this early space that it is literally controlling the entire life cycle going forward. And when we heard Sequoia say, we want to be Disney, we want to be like cradle to grave for like, God bless you. You look exactly like Disney. And then we saw SoftBank with their calamitous experience of moving from PE, private equity, down to early stage venture capital, because they saw what's happening, exactly what I'm talking about.
Which is
that like everything is moving towards venture capital. Like right now, if a company is going public at $100 billion, I'm sorry, that's not an early stage company. Like that is a bigger market cap than the majority of companies out there. Look at Roblox, have just gone public. Reddit,
well, I think it's two confluent, two factors actually, right? One is, AI and software making things ever more scalable, right? And so you can get to these higher valuations faster in more capital efficient ways. 2, there's like more money, to your point, like chasing this, and more algorithms and AI and financial engineers and stuff like that. And then, that's driving like this, we just went through this crazy bubble. I don't even know what the revenue was for Coinbase when they went public, but it definitely didn't warrant $100 billion valuation, I'm sure. I'm sure if you looked it up, it was probably $1 billion or $2 billion or something like that. So it was probably some sort of crazy 100, 200, 300x forward revenue kind of deal, which was very bubbly.
Yes, it was. And I'm also not sure that, look, we know how these financial markets work. Most of it is about market manipulation. And most of the time, the people who end up getting hurt are the public who are outside because they're not following the market manipulation. A lot of other people are already inside the game. And there are some really beautiful things that are happening inside venture, like crowdfunding. I think regulation crowdfunding was really nice. And a lot of people who are outside got to get in companies. But I will tell you, the thing I'm kind of hating on, and my favorite things today, I think will have a big impact. So I'm kind of hating on AI, and I'm loving blockchain. Hate AI, love blockchain. So hate's a strong word.
That's kind of a contrarian point right now, I think, because a lot of people hate blockchain right now. They're, it's in the trial of disillusionment, right? It's kind of like, hey, it got overhyped, and it's kind of in this like, this will never work kind of thing. And the AI is like at its peak right now. So tell us about how you kind of arrived at.
This is a good conversation, because nobody gives a shit about where I came from or like what I do to reach my level of mediocrity, but it's about like what's coming going forward, right? So AI, like I'm actually good. I don't need to be more productive. That's the thing. I actually was pretty good before they invented email because I didn't have to deal with 200 emails a day. And Superhuman hasn't made that any better for me. And neither have any of the other awesome productivity tools that have been pushed my way. The only thing that's happened is all of my competitors also have 200 emails to deal every single day. And look, I'm not saying get rid of the phone. I'm just saying people used to turn up places, okay? And now nobody turns up anywhere. And so we go through this constant, even going back to the Industrial Revolution. And I'm not hating on the Industrial Revolution, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of the things that are brought out of, it will free the world. Robots are going to do all, like, it's not happening. It hasn't happened. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's happened is that we've ended up becoming far, far busier. And fewer people are doing jobs they used to do. Look, I'm an old guy, so I used to have a secretary years ago. Years and years and years and years. I used to use a dictaphone. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but a dictaphone. Most people don't even know what that thing was. It was right there by a fax machine. And we would go, hi, I would like to send a letter to John. And then the next one would be, same letter as to John, but do it John C. And then somebody would spend all day like typing all this stuff out. And that was a job. And that person finished at 5 o'clock in the evening and they went home and earned enough money and house prices were lower and food was lower. And we didn't have to pay like fucking $15 for a friggin' avocado. Like, it was simple. And then what happened was we got like AI. It was awesome. And then we got and computers. And so I would say I am cautiously optimistic about what's coming, but with a very skeptical Irish perspective. I think that there's interesting things coming. Did OpenAI justify $100 billion valuation on the very first day? No, they didn't. It was 100 times multiples, like straight away. It didn't happen. But what's happening is monopolies are being built. Unfairly, non-competitive monopolies are being built through insane amounts of money being thrown at them. And here's what happens when this happens. These fuckers, they hire every single data scientist that they can get, and they bring them all in. So the only person who's
$5 million a year
for real startups are friggin' schmucks who are there doing WordPress during the day, and now they have to be the data scientist in the evening. So this is incredibly strong narrative built around a really strange data space, which none of us understands what's happening. Our problem here is not who are the ones in Terminator who kind of killed us all, who tried to kill us until John Connor came back in to say, was it Skynet? Our problem is not Skynet coming to kill us. Our problem is the data intrusions and the control, which is coming in from centralized institutions that has been in place for the last 200-300 years and is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. The financial slavery and stranglehold that we are in today is worse than maybe any time in the last 50, 80 years.
So that's interesting. So I think if you kind of evaluate historical trends and paradigm shifts and technologies and political economies, we're sort of at the end of a cycle, which you might call the information age software cycle, where, software made the elites, the people you're talking about that, grab $5 million offers, $10 million offers from Google and OpenAI to create more software, right? Because you need the elites, the elite execs, the elite programmers, designers, product people to go create the software. And once they create it, 1 billion people can use it. That's software, right? The point could be made that maybe AI is a democratizing force where it equalizes access to the best talent, right? And you've seen this in some studies, right, where they'll put AI in a call center, and it doesn't help the elites, the star performers. It helps all the poor and average performers behave and perform like elites. Right? And so I think a case, and time will tell, right, how AI kind of shakes out. But you could make a case that it becomes like a utility that's just ambient and sitting around all of our systems, enabling us to have PhD level talent and support at our fingertips, right? And I think the long arc of history is that, right? The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? Elites today are living like the average of tomorrow. And I think that's been the long arc.
And the average are looking like the poor of tomorrow. Look, there's none of these. I read this great article actually on the weekend. It was talking about the early days of Andreessen and Netscape, and when they went to the 150 or 200 revolutionaries at the time and said, please, can we have the internet? Because we want to democratize the world. And we swear to you, and I can't remember what the pact was called, but it's a really beautiful pact. And it's like, we swear to you that the internet will always be free. And like the entire article went through the fact that they kept their word, but to what cost? Because data became a commodity that we no longer held anymore, that they actually were given so much power in their drive to give the internet for free that the cost of that power is something a little bit terrible. And I was having another really great conversation. I went to an event just around the Milken, which was all around mental health. And bizarrely, it was in this huge mansion, like $80 million mansion, to talk about democratizing something or other, you know. But I'll look past that.
The juxtapositioning is amazing.
Yeah, we'll look past that. And so, but it was speaking to the mental health challenges that are facing the world. And I have never been so afraid for people. Like, I live in Santa Monica, and it's so sad. I don't even know where to start. Like, the shops on 3rd Street Promenade are at least 20% empty. This is like look, I'm a guy from Dublin. If Dublin shops are closing, it's okay. That's just part of our regular cycle of riots that we do to make sure that happens. But like over here, I'm in the center of tourism in the world. Like, it's Santa Monica, and it's a ghetto. The 3rd Street Promenade is a ghetto. I'll tell you a funny joke. True story. There's a guy called Mike who I always get a coffee for on the corner of the street. And he's a super nice guy. I'm like, what coffee? What's coffee? Black coffee, cool. And I go over and I say, hey, Mike, I haven't seen you in a while. And he said, oh man, I had to get out of here. This place is going to shit. And so when Mike is saying that 3rd Street Promenade is going to crap, it's going to crap. I'm in the Santa Monica shopping mall. I think they are maybe 40% occupied. Maybe. They're one of the central malls in Santa Monica, central place of tourism in the world. Retail has died, which means community has died. The high street locations have died. The homeless is at its worst case it's ever been. Drug use is at its worst. People are trying to escape. Alcoholism is like no better.
Now, is this just a symptom? Because I'm in NorCal. I'm east of Sacramento in a little community called El Dorado Hills, and I'm having the opposite experience. Everything seems to be up and to the right. All the shops are full. People are happy and smiling and waving, and like everything's like good old-fashioned Americana out here. So is it just that people are fleeing the very expensive areas and saying, you know what, I'm tired of paying $5,000 a month in rent to live in a shitty apartment so I can live in Santa Monica, and I'm going to move out like east somewhere or north somewhere. And you know, that's exactly what I did during COVID, right? We're paying an exorbitant amount of money in Silicon Valley to live there. My wife's like, hey, we should get a lake house, go away on the weekends. And I was like, I think we'll just go live at a lake house. I don't think we need to be in Silicon Valley. I've been working from my bedroom now. I'm on my 3rd company, including 2 big tech companies. And I'm like, I don't want to live here in Silicon Valley anymore. I want to go like live by a lake somewhere in California. And so maybe, what's happening in my experience is people are just saying, you know what, enough is enough of the rat race. I'm going to go take a gig job on Upwork or whatever, or drive Uber and just live a nice little life out in the countryside somewhere. And that's a symptom of the fleeing of the cities. But I think they're building new communities. So just not in this old high demand compressed area.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. Honestly, the moment that I don't have to be in Santa Monica, I wouldn't be in Santa Monica.
Where would you go?
Anybody from Santa Monica Council are listening, you guys are awesome. But
Santa Monica is beautiful. It's a nice place. It's just really expensive, right? Like any home there is going to be what, $5 million, like a decent home, 4-bedroom, 3-bed house.
The other thing is, like, the world that we live in is kind of a different world to most of the folks. I do think it's a really challenging time right now. I think people are going through more difficulties and challenges than before. And but I believe we have a responsibility. It's really funny. I haven't really spoken about this stuff before. I normally talk about how growing companies and making sure that VCs are aligned with startups, that the toxic relationship should be, startups should be the kings and queens and VCs should be the glorified accountants. And this whole messed up thing we have is like, but if we're looking, I suppose my mind is in this place because myself and my wife had a conversation on Saturday, and I was talking to her about this roll-up that we were looking to do. And it was all about how we were bringing these AI pilots and we were going to bring them into writing scripts and writing songs and all those things. And we were going to help create libraries, which was one of the biggest libraries in the world for IP. And she said to me, but there's a human cost to this. And I was like, okay. And she said, there's so many writers now who are out of job, but it's not that like innovation and technology shouldn't be forcing all of us to go better. It's just that it's never been going so fast as it is going right now. It's going way too fast. And so you could have said to me when I was in school, Brian, this whole dictaphone thing and secretary thing is going to change. You know that, right? So you got like 10 years and then this sucker is going to change into something different and then you're going to have to evolve. So if you can predict that, you're good. But the thing is like, who saw this happening 2 years ago? You know what I mean? And I use them.
It came out of nowhere. Yeah.
You know, I mean, this isn't actually me, even with this perspective. This was me just with really open ears on the weekend. And I thought, wow, actually, the actions that I have today can have an effect on hundreds of thousands of people. And it's not that you can stop innovation, but you can most definitely have a voice in your mind that says that we have an obligation to these people, that if there are certain people getting insanely rich, and if everywhere we look on TikTok, it's how to become a billionaire or how to become a millionaire, then maybe there's a discussion around the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people who are being disenfranchised on the other end. That's all I think. I think it's a conversation that
so economists would call that creative destruction, where there's displacement in labor. And it remains to be seen, right? Like, I think we've had this argument now for, a couple hundred years since the Industrial Revolution, right? When, the engine came out and different kinds of yarn spinning equipment came out and full steam powered factories, the lemmings, right? Throwing, Luddites, not the lemmings, the Luddites throwing wrenches into
lemmings were good guys too.
Yeah, throwing, wrenches into the machinery. So, my prediction, anyway, as a student of trends, and I've been following these now since I was a kid, watching Star Trek and stuff, and just kind of thinking about it and watching it unfold. You and I have both lived through this kind of analog to digital, pre-internet to internet. Like at least I have. I assume if you move from Ireland, from like middle class or lower middle class poverty to.
I wish you had the noise. If you could. Now, this is a time now in the podcast where you have to have the modem noise. as you're...
I don't have the production money yet for that. My podcast isn't making much money, but someday, I'll be like, all right, producer Nick, throw that in. That's funny. But so my prediction is, with this technological platform shift, we actually see more of everything produced than ever before, right? In all kinds of ways that we can't imagine. Right. If you would have told me that people would be making millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions, in the case of Mr. Beast on YouTube every year, making YouTube content, like, I'd be like, that's insane. And yet there's tens of thousands of people out there, I forget the number, that make a living making YouTube content. So, it's a long tail. Yeah.
But very few. Yeah. Most of them make no money at all. And they live under the illusion that they're going to make money. Okay, I got a prediction for you. So here's my optimism, right? In a world that is crumbling around us and planning and all that kind of stuff, is like, there is a really good thing. And I'm not saying AI is bad or terrible. AI is good. All I'm just saying is it's overhyped. And it's overhyped by a bunch of VCs who are underwater because they made shitty investments. They called it a bad vintage. Like, I don't know how wine fits in with making shitty investment decisions, but apparently it does, right? So they're coming off the back of a bad vintage. They need some hype so they can push the values of companies up. AI, even though I see absolutely nothing that has evolved in any kind of meaningful or proper way in the last 2 years or 3 years, but AI is going to be that discussion they're going to have. God bless them. Let them do that. Nobody's driving my car. Nobody's turning up for work while I get to stay in bed and pretending they're Brian. And nobody's going to go on stage like this week or next week talking about whatever bullshit I talk about like me. It's all still me. Here's what I love. I love blockchain. And I'll tell you why I love blockchain. And blockchain has to be decoupled from crypto, right? They are not the same conversation. Crypto is noise that is creating a narrative which takes away from a fundamentally really important conversation. So here's what happened. I had Brock Pierce, who is probably one of the most famous people in crypto. And he was around Santa Monica 10, 12 years ago when I opened the dojo. And we were not investing 10, 12 years ago. We only started investing like 5 years or so ago. 10 years ago, I was still lost and wondering what I would do when I grew up. And so Brock would come, but we had this beautiful big place on top of the Santa Monica Mall overlooking 3rd Street Promenade. And Brock came in and he would talk to groups of people because we created this hub for entrepreneurs. And he would talk so eloquently about the fact that the biggest inefficiency that exists in the world is centralization. And I'm like, I'm down with that. That's totally true. Centralization sucks. Like, forget about like poor people, rich people, power, non-power. It's just centralization is a one-way ticket to a shitty, terrible economic system which represses people. But we've had it since the beginning of time. And he spoke about this algorithm that got built, and this algorithm that actually allowed, which was deeper, that formed the technology, and it allowed us to track and trace every single thing that happened with more accuracy and more truth than human beings saying, the train arrived, the train left. Actually tracked forever. And I was like, I love this. Right. But then I looked at the tech through a few people and I was like, actually, nothing's really being built yet, but it sounds really awesome. Right. But it's kind of being built, sort of being built. And everybody was reaching back to Bitcoin technology, which in itself, I still believe is one of the greatest singular monetary systems that has ever been built. Whether we like the speculation or not is irrelevant. The fact that it halves every 4 years is killer. The fact that the algorithm gets more difficult, so it's harder to mine, is more. But like, I love math, and math, not human greed or emotions, dictate what happens within Bitcoin and how many of them are there. And it will reach a number whereby that number becomes the agreed number, whereby speculation doesn't become the main area for it. Anyway, I digress. Back to blockchain. So I saw blockchain, and I was like, this is cool. And then I saw these people doing ICOs, and I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, because number one, there's no technology in place yet. There's no anything there. So we invested in no ICOs. I got involved in no ICOs. The moment somebody said to me that they want a bit of dating on the ICO, I'm like, dude, I can't think of a single girl who's ever dated me, who would ever want to like remember that. So no. And then I watched them, but I watched blockchain from afar, and I was very involved with it. And I brought in companies that I believed could be track and trace. And just so everybody understands, there are really 2 or 3 fundamentally important things with blockchain. Number one, that you can fractionalize. You can fractionalize really, really, really well, which means lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people to like the tiniest degree can all share in stuff. Well, it's very hard to do that in non-blockchain. Number 2, everything can be traced. And there's no necessity for central forces in the middle of it. That on its own is a fundamental shift in technology, greater. It is a paradigm shift greater than any bullshit of some fucking robot rolling around on wheels telling me it can bring me breakfast and some coffee at 7:00 every morning and share the news with me. This changes an entire system. It is so terrifying for nations that you can now have rogue nation states, because no longer do we care about nations for money. Right. And my thumb up. Right?
You got the thumbs up.
And then but then now it's like, well, then what else have they got? Healthcare and police? Well, they suck at healthcare. So they sure as hell better make sure that the police and the security in the country do their job. And honestly, most places are kind of sucking at that as well. You lose your currency and you have a major problem. So I loved the fact that I was trying to do that. And I'll add one extra point, and then that's it. I'm done. Right. And I had a number of technology investments which were bordering on blockchain. I never did any tokens, never did any crypto. I didn't even really honestly do Bitcoin for most of the time, except for investments and some funds that are involved in them. But so I went to ETH in Denver, and ETH in Denver is a builders conference, right? They're just geeks there. There's nobody there. Yeah. They might speculate, but only if their sister forced them to, right? They're just there building cool stuff. And we have a couple of great companies. One of them is called Zeev, who are building Zero, and they're building a decentralized, automated, roll-up as a service, which is really a sequencer of sorts, right? Thinking of it very simply, it would be like the internet in 1970. It would cost you $500,000 or $1 million to make a website. Well, imagine if you had Shopify or Squarespace back then. That's kind of what these guys do. They facilitate an expensive system. And so I said to them, guys, you guys are going to rock. You're going to take over the world. You're going to be a unicorn. You're going to be doing great. I'm so happy we invested in you. Let's find out who your competition are so we can decimate them. And they're like, that's not what we do in this space. We work together. They're our friends. And I realized something that I haven't realized in a long time. When revolutions are built, like true bloodless revolutions are built by people who deeply believe in the fundamental value of purpose over profit, but knowing that there's huge profit to come from it, amazing things happen. So I've thrown my hat in there. I love what's going on there.
I think it's a super cool technology. It's super interesting. I think really good thoughts on it. I also didn't buy into the whole crypto, stuff. I had an opportunity to buy it very early on. I should have, in hindsight, right? It would have been a nice 1,000x for me or something. But, I was just like, my concern about especially the currency side of it is that the government will come in and regulate it eventually because they have a monopoly on currency. The blockchain side is interesting because it lends itself well to use cases where you need transparency and trust, and you want to do it in a distributed kind of way where there is no central authority. My problem as an investor has always been, and I've done some picks and shovels kind of plays in the space. I've never done anything kind of consumer facing, but my problem with it always was, is it the simplest, easiest, most efficient way to do it, right? Per record. And so far it hasn't been. I think that the technology will get there where it will be the default choice. It's just a question of when, right? Are we internet 1984? We have the DARPA kind of, conduits in between the universities, or are we is it internet 98 where it's just really starting to kind of take off, or is it somewhere in between those two? I'm not sure. But I'm
not sure if I love the idea of it. I love the idea. I want to be part of something that's fucking with things, that's changing stuff, that's building new paradigms. But it's really interesting to see that the dark overlord of the universe, Andreessen, are so heavily in
they are
blockchain organization. That tells us something. That's all I'm saying.
They see some sort of opportunity there, and that is a really good point. So in the last 5 minutes or so, let's talk about Expert Dojo, what you guys invest in, how you guys founded the accelerator, with vision for the future, for any founders listening, what should they know about the program and getting in touch and all that stuff. I could talk about technology and society forever, by the way. So I want to bring it back to Expert Dojo for the last 5 minutes.
So I started the dojo because I believed that accelerators were an awesome thing and that more of them were needed.
I'm a huge fan.
And within a year of it, I realized that most of accelerators were an entirely waste of time, including ours for founders. And so although we've invested in 300 companies, I've gone through a whole journey of realizing that just because something was great 25 years ago, it doesn't mean that it's great today. And we have to evolve in what we're doing. I love my founders, and our founders generally like the fact that we have a lot of love for them. So when we looked at it, we're like, okay, it doesn't work. So what do we do? If a 12
So wait, so you looked at the data, you kind of looked at people that went through the program, companies that went through the program. You're like, are we really having an impact here?
Yes.
Was that the question? That was the existential question.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Because we didn't ask them if they liked us. One of our top growth hackers, Chad Zaney, is he's at a unicorn. He's brought the company public. And I'm like, yeah, Chad, you can go through the entire program. They all love us. He goes, I'm not going to ask them how they feel. I'm going to ask them how much outreach they did last week versus 2 weeks before they came in the program. Because if the number is the same, you guys fucking suck. And so we found out, and this is a very scary thing for any company to go in. We are all startups. We are all building out what we hope will become Horizon 3 companies in the future. But right now, it has to be a lovable product, and that has to be transformative. And so we're like, okay, cool, let's cancel all of our cohorts. So we cancel every single cohort. Haven't done one in 2 years. And now what we do is we do full audits on companies when they come in. We measure out their paths to a Series A, and then we'll do an audit on their outbound, their emotional resonance, their lovable product, their domain dominance, which is a whole different thing that we could go into, and their investment, because investment is important. It's just not as important, but it's part of the journey. And then based on that, then we put growth hackers in with them every month, focusing on a different area for 4 years. So we're evolving, we're getting better. I don't think we've by any means got the best yet, but I think we're at least questioning things that are making us not the worst.
That's amazing.
And we're going to keep on investing. We're opening up in India. I just opened up another crypto fund. We're probably one of the biggest investors in Africa now by deal numbers. We've got 50 investments in Africa.
Yeah, I've done some co-investing in Africa with you guys. Yeah. Not a focus for me, but every once in a while I get a good deal, coming through. So thanks for that.
We got to talk because we just brought, Credit, who are one of the companies that we just brought through, KREDETE.
Yeah, that's a portfolio company of ours. I met them through you guys, actually. Yeah, we invested in the pre-seed.
I'll tell you about Credit. Can I finish on a story about Credit?
Yeah, let's do Credit, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Okay, Credit. So when I first saw Credit, the guy's an animal. He's a beast. And so when he first did a pitch to us, I'm like, I love what you guys are doing. You're solving a huge problem. Western Union are terrible. They charge like $10, $20 to send money over, and then they kill you on the FX fees to do $100, daylight robbery. He came in, he was building another thing called the Lightning Network, which is blockchain, right? Which allows him to send money over to Africa for $1. And we can do it for hardly anything on the FX. So we worked with him on the branding, on the messaging, and everything else. I would say, like, I'm almost living with the guy now. I spend more time with him than I do with my wife. And then so as he grew from like $20K a month up to $180,000 a month in 6 months, he is on fire. And then we sat down and we had this huge session about like, what do you do and how does it work? And he's like, I said it's cheaper and I do this. And I'm like, no, you fucking don't. Here's what you do. The African people have had over $1 billion stolen for them by Western Union. You are repatriating stolen money by the first ever fair payment transfer system. And we are going to get CPG, consumer generated content, from the people who received the money to talk about what they did with that extra $10 or $15. Did they get a taxi through a safe zone? Did they buy themselves a nice little meal in the afternoon? Whatever it was, we're going to capture the whole damn thing and then build one of the biggest financial services network on the entire continent. And I'll tell you another thing. He is not just oversubscribed. He is oversubscribed, because he understands the power of narrative on top of really good customer impact. So that's why I like blockchain.
Love it. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming on the program. I could have talked to you for the rest of the day, probably. So we'll have to have you back on the program in the future. Just let me know when, and we'll just do another hour. This was great. Thank you so much.
I normally get people to pay me not to come back.
Well, we're both just crazy enough to enjoy each other's company, I think.
And we're going to make some money from Credit. No, thank you, my friend. I got great respect from afar always. And let's just keep building great companies and helping the right people grow.
Love that. Thank you so much.